Fourth level of learning, Paper 5, Lucifer's Rebellion. Posted on February 3, 2019. By Wes Penra, written on Friday, October 11, 2013. Posted on Wednesday, January 14, 2014. Edited by Professor Bob Stannard. What led to the First Great Cosmic War? After the peace treaty between the Queen of the Stars and the King of Kings, En.ki was seated on the throne beside his new consort. Although the Queen had the ultimate say in important matters, En.ki was more than just second in command. He ran the Orion Empire together with his consort and does so up to present day. Star beings apparently see En.ki as a fair and just king, firm but with a good sense of justice, and therefore, he is respected by most, even his enemies. He is also a great warrior, something he brought with him from his own empire, and Queen Ni made him first in command of the Orion Mikmak troops. He became Mikhail's first in command. The entity we know here on Earth is Archangel Michael. Mikhail can also be spelled mi.ka.el, where El, like an Elohim, denotes heavenly power. And Ka is of course the Ka. In Orion language, you can reverse some words, therefore, me, in this case, could rightfully become Im, which means, by the side of the mother. So, im.ka.el would then read something like, of the heavenly power in the Ka, by the side of the mother. This is also where Mik, in Mek warriors comes from. Mek can be broken down into Ma and Kh, where Ma stands for mother and Kh is short for Ka, mother Ka. Thus, Kaniam.lil became the first commander of Queen Nine's personal star fleet. The elder of the two sons of Queen Nine, En.ki, didn't become known under this title until he claimed to be the Lord of Earth, which is exactly what the title means. Before then, he went under many names and titles, and one of them was Prince Lucifer. Prince Lucifer, or just Lucifer, are the titles I will use for Prince En.ki, until we get to the point in our story when he actually became En.ki, or Lord En.ki. Readers who know anything about Prince Lucifer, perhaps from the Aransha book or elsewhere, know that he was very proud and very brilliant. He was full of potential and had many good qualities, such as wisdom, sagacity, and efficiency, but he was arrogant as well. He knew how brilliant he was, and he certainly let others know about it. He was a natural-born leader and looked forward to be announced as the heir of the Orion Empire, in case something would happen to his stepfather, Kanian.lil. Queen Nine, to begin with, was very proud of her firstborn son, and was eager to teach him everything she knew because after all, Prince Lucifer was supposed to inherit the throne from Kanian.lil one day. Even if the Khan would live for millions of years, and being the crown prince or Orion and Mikhail second in command over the Mikh army was not a bad thing either. The heir of Orion could live a life of glamour if he wanted to, learn everything he needed, and become a brilliant creator goddess. After all, he was being taught by the goddess herself. The queen's hopes and wishes as his mother were always that her sons and daughters would share compassion and empathy with other beings who needed assistance. In general, life in Orion is allegedly what we would call laid back, although after a while, each citizen figures out what he or she can do in order to work for the greater good of the community. At first, Lucifer and his younger brother, Ninhursag, went along quite well, and there was peace and harmony in the Orion Empire. And no one seriously objected to the laws and policies coming from Satania, the inner sanction of the Orion Empire. As Lucifer and Ninhursag grew up, things changed, however. Prince Ninhursag continued to be respectful of the queen, his mother, and to his stepfather as well. And he was strict with applying and teaching the ways of the goddess, also called the divine feminine, to star races who were members of the Aryan Empire. Lucifer, too, who was considered very wise and knowledgeable, liked to teach others what he knew, but contrary to his brother, he had a tendency to choose whom he wanted to educate. Only where he saw certain potential did he share his knowledge. The rest of the beings in the empire he considered being too much below him and not worthy of his time. Lucifer later became disrespectful and arrogant and started breaking the laws that had kept the empire together for millions of years. When En.ki noticed what was happening, he consulted his consort and addressed his concern regarding letting Prince Lucifer inherit the throne of Orion, also called the Atlantic Standard Time, or sometimes ASHT. En.ki was afraid that if something would happen to him, in peace or in times of war, and Lucifer would take his place, he could become a liability to the empire. Once inheriting the Atlantic Standard Time, it came with a lot of duties and responsibilities, and except in very urgent matters, he would have the right to make major decisions on behalf of the empire. The queen sat quiet for a long time, and her black, beautiful face expressed a lot of sadness as she stared out in space. After what appeared to be an eternity, she looked her husband in the eyes and nodded, almost imperceptibly. "I have seen it, too," she said with a whisper. "My firstborn, in whom I have seen so much potential and whom I had such magnificent plans for, is showing no respect or interest in maintaining what we have built up with so much effort and compassion. He has become arrogant, almost aggressive, to those who are not of royal blood. He doesn't understand that everybody is equal in spirit. I need to talk to him." She did talk with him. She gave him a lecture with much compassion and understanding, doing what she could to make Lucifer look at things from different angles, which included treating those who are not of his blood as equals. If Lucifer took any of this to heart, he barely showed it. He didn't like to be lectured to or corrected, regardless of the manner in which it was done. His pride was such that he was his own counselor. After all, he was the great Lucifer, son of the Divine Mother, and this apparently meant in his mind that he didn't even have to take advice from her or anybody else. The queen acknowledged that it is acceptable to be one's own counselor, but beings, regardless where they come from, must be treated with respect. This, she said, is even more important when you are royal. As such, he needed to be a good example for others. Lucifer was talked to many times and had many chances to correct himself, but he never did. Eventually, the moment arrived when it was going to be officially announced who would be the heir of the Atlantic Standard Time. Such an announcement had never been done before because En.ki was the first and only king of Orion since the beginning of the empire, and En.ki had shared the Atlantic Standard Time with the queen. Therefore, it was a big event when the heirship was announced to the member stars of Orion. One may also assume that most beings would expect Lucifer to be announced as the heir because, after all, he was the eldest of the two brothers. Hence, this surprise must have been quite big when it was announced that Prince Ninhursag was dubbed Mikhail, second in command of the Micmac, and the heir of the Atlantic Standard Time. Whether Lucifer knew about this beforehand or not is unknown to me, but I know for a fact that the decision to let his younger brother take the throne from him made him completely furious. In great rage, he spoke his mind in front of his mother and father, and he said that because he was different from what they expected him to be, this was no reason to bypass him. His parents told him that it was not because he was different, but because he had showed so much disrespect for the laws and policies of Orion, and in spite of several conversations, neither had he shown remorse, nor any willingness to change his attitude. The result was that they had to put the empire before the individual, a choice necessary to make, and his brother, Prince Ninhursag, showed respect and understanding of why his parents had set up the vast empire in this way. The result had been peace, in general except for some rural conflicts, which could be considered normal in such a huge empire, and a population who lived in harmony and abundance. Why did anybody want to jeopardize that? Lucifer showed no signs of understanding this reasoning and left Satania in a rage. His parents thought that he probably needed some time to think things over. They did not know about the plans that were slowly growing in Lucifer's mind. He felt totally misunderstood and held back by his parents, and now he was punished for being himself. In no way was this acceptable to him. Thus, the first serious thoughts of rebellion against his parents and brother were taking shape in Lucifer's mind. 2. Preparing for revenge. Instead of taking time off to think things over, and eventually come to his senses, Lucifer did quite the opposite. This was not the first conflict in heaven. In a distant past, when the universe was young, several wars were fought. No one, however, would ever imagine that Prince Lucifer would take to arms against his own royal family. Nevertheless, this was not the last time he would take his family by surprise, as we shall see as we proceed down the timelines. After withdrawing from Satania, Lucifer traveled to Arcturus, where many of En.ki's old loyal soldiers were stationed. He knew how to be charming when necessary, and he knew how to be convincing when he needed to show that side of himself, something he needed a lot of for the rebellion to be successful. He knew his parents well enough to understand when they were serious, and after the announcement that his brother, Prince Ninhursag, had become the heir of the Atlantic Standard Time, he knew with great certainty that they would not go back on their decision. He, Lucifer, the bright star of the morning, had messed up. The Prince of Orion was both furious and embarrassed. The throne was his birthright, as he saw it, mainly because he was the eldest, but also because his mother had spent all this time teaching him what she knew in order to prepare him for his bright future. He was still a prince, but he could never be anything more than that, and he would never be able to claim any throne anywhere in the Orion Empire. Thus were the Orion laws. Under these circumstances, Lucifer thought that he had nothing to lose. For him, it was all or nothing, and nothing was not an option. If he couldn't get the throne the legal way, he just had to take it by force and change the laws later. Fig 1. Lucifer recruiting his angels in the Spica star system. He had one big trump card that he was going to play immediately, before it was too late. Although the common citizens of the Orion Empire in general didn't exactly adore Lucifer because he was sitting on his high horse most of the time, he was deeply respected and loved by the so-called Dick warriors, who were the soldiers that threatened Orion at the time just before the peace treaty, and they had once been En.ki's army. Many of the Dick warriors from that time had now become the Queen's and the King's private guardian forces, and they were very skilled and very loyal to the Orion royalty. However, there were still officers in the Dick who did not agree with their King of Kings, En.ki, when he decided to join forces with the Orion Empire. They believed that their king was clever and strong enough, with the best army in Sector 9 of the Milky Way galaxy, to take on Orion. However, since the king had even gone as far as to marry the Queen of Orion, they kept their contempt to themselves. Only when they were sure that the walls had no ears did they discuss the matter with each other, and perhaps they were planning a revolution of their own. Even if Lucifer wouldn't have come into the picture, we will probably never know. Therefore, Lucifer was surprised how easy it was to convince the Dick officers, stationed in Arcturus and in Spica, that something needed to be done with the current situation. The Dick warriors were missing something crucial, however, which was the reason they hadn't rebelled earlier. They needed a great strategist, a great leader, who could fulfill their plans. When they heard that Prince Lucifer had been refused the Atlantic Standard Time, they immediately called for a meeting and showed each other their contempt. Lucifer's embarrassment was good news for them because they might have their great strategist, trained by the Queen herself. Of course, Lucifer was an Aryan from Orion, and normally this would have created a trust issue. But the DIG officers believed that they could trust Lucifer because of his anger toward his own family, and if there was one Aryan they really liked, it was Lucifer. They didn't mind seeing him as their commander, and perhaps later, even as their king. Encouraged by the response he received from some of the disloyal DIG warriors, Lucifer continued his silent recruitment and went into other star systems and asterisms to talk to their leaders. He told them a story that was only partially true and added to and subtracted from the real story, which made it sound as if the leaders he was talking to got some real inside information from the prince, and from his twisted perspective. He gave them a version of the story that made it sound as if Lucifer had been very ill-treated, indeed. Many of these leaders, who perhaps should have known better, believed the charming and convincing prince. One of the asterisms where he got a lot of positive response was in Taurus, the bull, where the Pleiades are located. Taurus became one of his stronger allies. Lucifer did not manage to bring everybody to his side, so when I speak of asterisms, such as Taurus, I mean he got a good response there, although the majority most probably remained loyal to the Queen of the Stars. However, Lucifer was very careful about choosing whom he spoke with, and silence was sometimes not only a virtue, but also a necessity for the rebellion not to be turned down while in its cradle. Somehow, he managed to accomplish that, and rumors of his rebellion never reached the Atlantic Standard Time until it was too late. While he was recruiting rebels, Lucifer managed to place spies within the Queen's court as well. This wasn't as hard to do as it may seem and didn't necessarily have to do with the lack of security, because Lucifer had recruited DIG officers from Arcturus, Spica, and Virgo. And as members of the Orion Empire, they were free to travel anywhere they wanted to within the Empire. As DIG officers, they also had access to the royal court. It happened regularly that officers from other asterisms came to the court or were even summoned by the Queen. We can probably think of the Orion Court, in this case, as we do of Washington, D.C., but without the corruption. The rebellious prince took his time and did the absolute best he could to prepare for the moment when it was time to strike. He realized that in order to be able to pull this off at all, the coup d'etat had to happen from within, and it had to happen in high places for it to work. He knew that the best chances of success were if he could strike very quickly. That was the plan of Lucifer and his bird tribe. It was as the bird tribe, also called the Namlú'u, that the rebels became known in Sector 9, and I will explain later in this paper why they were known under this name. Speaking of birds, one of the symbols of the Orion Empire is the eagle, and later on, the rebels stole the symbol of the eagle and used it as their own symbol. We can now see the bald eagle as a symbol for the United States of America, being Lord En.ki's sigil here on Earth. The American Indians, and many native tribes in other countries as well, dress themselves in feathers, which is an ancient worship of the bird tribe, the tribe of Lord En.ki. En.ki has dwelled in the Pleiades on and off over the eons, and that's where many Native Americans claim that they originate from. More about this soon. 3. There was a war in heaven. But this war in heaven was very terrible and very real. While displaying none of the barbarities so characteristic of physical warfare on the immature worlds, this conflict was far more deadly. Material life is in jeopardy in material combat, but the war in heaven was fought in terms of life eternal. Cosmic warfare is always fought in other dimensions, and these wars can be far more deadly than the wars we fight down on Earth. It is horrible enough when we see young soldiers being shot to pieces in another country, young men with dreams of a life with a family that is often waiting for them at home. The same thing applies to the heavenly wars, but with one exception. On Earth, we shoot our buddies to pieces, but the soul the fire and the avatar continues into an afterlife. In many of the cosmic wars, where the parties have advanced technology and the deadliest of weapons, the body the combatants are aiming at is not the physical 3D body, which does not exist, but the avatar itself. Their weapons can split the avatar in pieces, so the fire doesn't have anywhere to go. There is no light body to cling to. The fire soul is, therefore, bound to float in space without direction as a victim to the galactic currents, which will take her wherever they blow, if not rescued and brought together. The fire has no choice but to dissolve and become one with the universe again. She loses her identity and merges with space and with nothingness, even if such a seriously wounded soul is rescued by her own troops. It's a severe condition, and it takes time to create a new avatar, and sometimes it may not even be possible. It's like when one of our soldiers dies on the operation table. The rebellion, which has been titled the First War in Heaven, was devastating indeed. The ASHT book speaks about it, and so does the Bible as well as many other scriptures. Lucifer's plans, however, or at least some of them, had leaked out before he struck, and Archangel Michael, second in command Prince En.ki, had been informed that his brother had plans to overthrow the Orion court. He told his mother and his father, who took the news with a lot of sadness, but also with a realization that offering the heirship to the younger of the two brothers had been a very wise decision. Of course, regardless of who is trying to overthrow the sitting court of Orion, he or she needs to be defeated and penalized. Therefore, Archangel Michael, first in command and second in command, gathered the En.ki troops in silence and waited for Lucifer to attack, ready to strike back as soon as the rebel made any efforts. Then the strike came. Lucifer's plan was brilliant, and he may have had more success had not some of his loyal officers realized that they had been mesmerized by this being and fallen into some kind of hypnotic trance. Some of them had been strong enough to break out of the mind control, and now they confronted the Crown Prince of Orion with the news. These brave beings risked their lives by telling about their own involvement in the coup plans, but they were pardoned because of their bravery and signed up to fight for the courtship instead. It says in the ASHT book, there were many noble and inspiring acts of devotion and loyalty which were performed by numerous personalities during the interim between the outbreak of hostilities and the arrival of the new system ruler and his staff. But the most thrilling of all these daring feats of devotion was the courageous conduct of Namlú'u, the second in command of the Satania headquarters Seraphim. Although the names of the characters here, as well as their titles, are those of the ASHT book, they can be directly transformed into our own story. Although Prince En.ki was not a Seraphim, Namlú'u in the above-quoted paragraph corresponds directly to Prince En.ki, who showed his incorruptible devotion to his parents, the court, and the survival of the Empire of Orion. He made a lot of courageous acts during the devastating war, and evidence of the ferocious battles could be witnessed in the heavens as supernovae. Areas of the heavens suddenly being lit up, with planets destroyed and bounced out of orbit. Still, most devastating was the many brave soldiers who gave their eternal lives to the Empire, souls that will forever be remembered in Orion. Fig 2. War in Heaven. Prince En.ki and his En.ki fighting the rebels. During the battles, Lucifer once again used his charm and his extraordinary ability to manipulate. At the outbreak of rebellion on Jerusalem, the head of the seraphic hosts joined the Lucifer cause. This no doubt explains why such a large number of the Fourth Order, the system administrator Seraphim, went astray. The seraphic leader was spiritually blinded by the brilliant personality of Lucifer. His charming ways fascinated the lower orders of celestial beings. They simply could not comprehend that it was possible for such a dazzling personality to go wrong. Many were those who temporarily, due to the turmoil of the war, got seduced by Lucifer and changed side, starting to fight for him instead of against him. Thinking that this brilliant being couldn't be wrong. This made the war last longer than the Orion court had anticipated, and unfortunately, it required more blood to be spilled. Although some of these traitors later regretted their acts of treason and asked for mercy, they were not pardoned by the court. Too much damage had been done in their names. Prince Ninhursag said afterward, "But my most exhilarating moment was a thrilling adventure connected with the Lucifer rebellion when, as second seraphic commander, I refused to participate in the projected insult to Michael. And the powerful rebels sought my destruction by means of the liaison forces they had arranged. Even he had been tested by Lucifer, who had tried to put his own brother under the trance of thinking ill thoughts about Michael first in command, that is Coniem.lil. But Prince Ninhursag had had no problem seeing through his brother's manipulative intentions. In the outbreak of the war, the arch-rebels managed to take parts of Arcturus, Spica, and Leo as their stronghold, and although they eventually lost the war, these constellations are still mainly under the rebels' command. Aldebaran in Taurus was also conquered, and today is Lucifer's headquarters, according to some. Fig 3. The Fall of Lucifer. The casualties of Lucifer's rebellion in Satania, Orion, is said to have been 681,227 soldiers, according to one source. That's more than 500,000 beings, belonging to different star races on both sides of the war. Eventually, however, in the most ferocious battle, Prince Ninhursag managed to throw Lucifer and his angels out of Orion, and the gates to the inner sanction of the Ka were now closed for Lucifer and any of the fallen angels who escaped with him. According to the legend, Prince Ninhursag, as Archangel Michael, in his fight with Lucifer, struck the stone of exile, the lapis lazuli, which was Lucifer's crown jewel, from his crown, whence it fell into the abyss. The Prince of Light, who now became known as the Prince of Darkness, took his troops with him and settled in Aldebaran, licking his wounds and figuring out his next step. Fig 5. Archangel Michael. Why Aldebaran? Some may ask. What made Aldebaran in the Pleiades so precious to Lucifer? The truth is that he chose that star as a retreat for a good reason. Aldebaran lies right between Aries and Orion, making a trail of stars. By taking Aldebaran as his stronghold, he created a congestion in this trail. From Orion, through Aldebaran in Taurus, and to Aries was a trail of stars that was under Prince Ninhursag's control, assigned to him by his parents. In order to create a disruption, a congestion, Prince Lucifer decided to take over Aldebaran as a last act of revenge in the first war in heaven. By creating this blockage in the previously clean flow of energies between the suns, it was like switching off a hub in an electric current between two computer devices. There is no longer a free flow of energy. Also, being in charge of Aldebaran, and basically the rest of the constellation of Taurus, Lucifer now had many star races who lived there under his command. What did he do with them? Would it be best to kill them or to recruit them? Should he, perhaps, use them as slaves that he could send elsewhere? Maybe even to Earth in the future? There were a lot of possibilities, and he considered them all. Ever since Lucifer took ownership of Aldebaran, also known as Alpha Tauri, there has been another ongoing war with Orion with Aries on one side and Taurus the Bull on the other, a war that's still ongoing. As the Pleiadians, channeled by Barbara Marciniak said, and I paraphrase, "We have had our confrontations with Orion." With the arrival of Lanaforge, the arch-rebels were dethroned and shorn of all governing powers, though they were permitted freely to go about Gerusalem, the Morintia spheres, and even to the individual inhabited worlds. They continued their deceptive and seductive efforts to confuse and mislead the minds of men and angels. But as concerned their work on the administrative Mount of Gerusalem, their place was found no more. Although Lucifer was now gone, and the first war in heaven was over, peace was still not established in the heavens. Battles have been rarer since those days, but there is an ever-ongoing battle between Lucifer and the Orion Empire. Some of our alternative historians and researchers see it as a battle between two brothers, En.ki and En.lil, Ninhursag, but it's so much bigger than that. It's about who is going to have control over the Orion Empire. It's the story of jealousy and revenge. This battle was at one time brought down to us here on Earth, but that is something for later. Then we will learn what really happened here on our planet in prehistoric times and in the times that followed. However, let's first consider the consequences from the rebellion. Some of these consequences are directly related to what later happened here on Earth. Once again, as we shall see, the slogan, "As above, so below," is very appropriate. IV. The sole prisoners of the Dark Star. The rebels who managed to escape after the war either went together with Lucifer or fled to the constellation of Draconis, where they settled down in the Thupan system, built a stronghold, and became known as the Alpha Draconians. However, not all of Lucifer's fallen angels escaped when Lucifer was cast out of heaven. There were a lot of prisoners of war. Because this had been a civil war, the first of its kind, the Orion Court had to decide what to do with the rebels who had helped kill and torture so many Orion troops. Previously, the Empire had been faced with enemies from outside the realms of Orion, and laws were set to handle such situations. But a rebellion in the midst of their own empire was something they had hardly conceived of. They wanted to rebel against their own people, especially when they were treated very well by the court of Satania? Naive thinking, perhaps, but we must remember that this happened long ago, in our terms, and civil wars were unheard of in Orion. The lot fell on Sirius C, the Dark Star. Before we discuss what happened, let us understand the entire Sirius system. Most people who know some astronomy are aware that Sirius is at least a double star system, with a big, white primary star of spectral class A, emitting much more energy than our own Sun. This primary star is called Sirius A. This star is orbited by a much smaller white dwarf star, which is called Sirius B. Sirius is mainly populated by Lucifer's hybrids, who are the children of Lucifer and Isis, Isis being connected with Sirius, where the most prominent offspring from that connection is Mardukra, who later on populated Alpha Draconis with his own people. Sirius B, the small white dwarf star, is populated by the offspring of Marduk. Sirius C is, in a manner, linked to Sirius A, as we shall see, via Lucifer's fallen angels, his Interu bird tribe remaining the gods of the Black Lands. Where Black Lands pertains to lands in the Ka, who are the fallen aquatic bird tribe who rebelled against Kani.lil and Lady Ninhursag, the Queen of the Stars. Sirius C is a dark star, which refers to dark energy, and is located in the Ka. This is the star around which En.ki and Queen 9 placed the prisoners of war who had been captured during the first rebellion, and especially at the end of it, when they tried to flee but were surrounded and caught in their flight. The bird tribe was of the guardian race, which originated in Arcturus. Many of them had once been proud warriors, but were now stripped of all their titles. Sirius D is the last in line of the stars in the Sirius star system. This is a star never heard of in mainstream science, but we can prove that it's there because we look at it almost every day, at least when the skies are clear. Sirius D is nothing else but our own sun, which by some is said to belong to the Sirius star system. I mentioned this in passing earlier on, but now we're going to take this hypothesis a little bit further. I mentioned that our own sun, which we sometimes call Sol, works like a hub in a trail of stars. Where have we heard that before? Oh yes, when Lucifer settled in Aldebaran, he blocked the trail of stars, which was so important for the Orions. In the relationship between Sirius and Sol, Sirius is the bright star that transmits an enormous amount of energy to Sol, which in turn sends that energy further to warm up the inner planets. That is Mercury, Venus, Earth, and Mars, respectively. The outer planets are warmed up as well to a certain degree, but are not necessarily in dire need of sunlight. By using Sol as a hub, the AIF can also decide how much energy they want to run from Sirius to Sol and from Sol to Earth. This determines ice ages and global warming, etc. By using the energy from the Sun, being transmitted from Sirius A, they have the power over life and death on our planet. IV.I. The Homo, the aquatic bird tribe. Many people are connecting the aquatic race, the Homo, with Sirius. I would say that this is correct. Homo is just another name for the Ninhursag bird tribe that rebelled against the Orion Empire, and most of them are now imprisoned around the dark star, Sirius C, together with other star races that rebelled. I am aware of that this may come as a shock to some people, who thought the Nomos are a friendly race, especially after have read Robert Temple's The Sirius Mystery, where they are the Dogon race, which the Dogon tribe in Africa connected with Sirius B in the earlier parts of the 20th century. Although they allegedly had never heard of Sirius B from any source outside the tribe, these Nomos allegedly came to the village of this African tribe, traveling in skyships. I would say that there is definitely truth to this allegation, and Robert Temple makes a good case, for the most part. Although, none of this being Temple's fault, the Dogon tribes got it slightly wrong, as the Nomos actually come from Sirius C, and not Sirius B in fact. Some of the Dogon tribe members seem to have understood that they came from a dark star, as shown in this reference. For some it is an invisible star that should rise to announce the sync. Although there is some controversy amongst scientists whether Sirius C exists or not, there is actual evidence that it does. Wikipedia states, this alludes to reports that the Dogon knew of another star in the Sirius system, Amya, or a star larger than Sirius B but lighter and dim in magnitude. In 1995, gravitational studies indeed showed the possible presence of a brown dwarf star orbiting around Sirius, a Sirius C with a 6-year orbital period. A more recent study using advanced infrared imaging concluded that the probability of the existence of a triple star system for Sirius is now low, but could not be ruled out because the region within 5O of Sirius had not been covered. So, in 1995, a possible presence of a third star in the Sirius system was indicated. Because some of the Dogon tribe had mentioned this, too, the importance of such a find was pointed out by Robert Temple. If a Sirius C is ever discovered and found to be a red dwarf, I will conclude that the Dogon information has been fully validated. The Nomos are also listed in Wikipedia, and the general description of this race is as follows. The Nomo are ancestral spirits Somedames referred to as deities worshipped by the Dogon tribe of Mali. The word Nomos is derived from a Dogon word meaning to make one drink. The Nomos are usually described as amphibious, hermaphroditic, fish-like creatures. Folk art depictions of the Nomos showed creatures with humanoid upper torsos, legs, feet, and a fish-like lower torso and tail. The Nomos are also referred to as masters of the water, the monitors, and the teachers. Nomo can be a proper name of an individual, or can refer to the group of spirits as a whole. For purposes of this article, Nomo refers to a specific individual and Nomos is used to reference the group of beings. Therefore, there is certainly indications from different sources that the Nomos, that is the aquatic Teru bird tribe, is an amphibian species. If we take the above quote seriously, taking into consideration how the Nomos are depicted, can they also be a reference to the mermaids, whom sailors have claimed to have seen on their voyages across the seven seas? In the hypothesis I am presenting here, many of the beings living in the Sirius system are Lucifer's offspring, and so are the Pleiadians. Lucifer, when he went to the Pleiades, created a new hybrid race there, but later also brought some of the Sirian hybrids to the Pleiades. This must be the reason why Barbara Marciniak's Pleiadians recently said on a CD that they had worked together with the En.ki in person, at least since the beginning of the nanosecond. Then, in extension, Lucifer's parents are the En.ki, which are the ancient ones, the guardian race, the bird tribe. However, the ancient ones are not the same bird tribe as the ones that rebelled, and one of the symbols of the ancient ones, as mentioned earlier, is the eagle. Fig 6. The Nomos, here visiting the Dogon tribe, presenting themselves as aquatic beings. In Level 2, I described the ancient ones as a reptilian race, black-skinned, and looking like something between a reptilian and a humanoid. This was correct, but most of the races have evolved since the beginning of time in this universe, and something we learned in school was that the birds come from the dinosaurs. I would say that this can be applied when we're talking about the ancient ones, as well. I am not saying that they look like eagles, but they are affiliated in some ways. Fig 7 and 8. Two Nomo archetypes. Why are the Nomos called aquatic? Aren't they a bird tribe? In fact, they are both, and it's not as strange as it may sound. Aqua means water, of course, but water in a cosmic sense can mean both sweet water, salt water, ocean, and cosmic ocean, that is space, or void. As an allegory, we could say that they are aquatic because of the punishment they got. More about that in the next subsection, where they are floating around in space. But they are also aquatic in their physical outlook. See Fig 7. And Fig 8. These pictures may not give justice to how they actually look, but they will give the readers an idea of what I mean. There is hardly any doubt that both Lucifer and many of those who followed him were amphibian creatures, as presented on this excellent website. IV.ii. The imprisonment of the Luciferian rebels. Back in Orion, Queen 9 decided to use the Dark Star as a prison for the traitors. She talked to her consort, Connie En.ki, and her son, Prince Ninhursag, and they all agreed that the crime the rebels had committed was high treason. Queen 9 voted for a penalty, where criminals are stuck within an electronic prison, a grid, or a veil of sorts, from which they cannot escape. In addition, they were ripped of their fire. From what I understand, this is an Orion term for depriving someone of his or her rights to ever become a creator goddess, but also for making the avatar useless, having as an effect that the being can't move around freely in space and time. The avatar is somehow locked, so the fire can't navigate it. The queen also decided that Connie M.Lil and her son, Prince Ninhursag, should execute the verdict for the Nomos. Most of the Nomos and other beings that rebelled together with them are still prisoners of war today, trapped in the electronic prison. Lucifer, however, has made several attempts to free his former legion, and thought of many brilliant ideas to do so. Many of the Nomos were extremely competent warriors and loyal officers in Lucifer's legion, and he missed their competence and their loyalty. He needed their intelligence, their strength, their ruthlessness, and their willingness to go as far as it was needed in order to get the job done. This included genocide and destruction of entire star races. As we shall see, Lucifer actually managed to free a few of his men, and this is part of the reason why I am saying that the Nomos came from Sirius C to Earth, where they allegedly met with the Dogon tribe. However, there is more to the story, much more. Before the Nomos, and the rest of the prisoners of war, were ripped off their fire as a part of their verdict, they were forced to hard labor, which in this case was mining. Sirius is said to have many planets with short lifespans, which had to be mined. As we will see later, mining is a big part of business and trade in the universe, and in this case, the mining that the prisoners had to do can be compared to when we do community service. Thus, it's easy to see where our own human habits and programs originate from. In mythology, this dungeon, where the wicked were placed, sounds similar to that of Tartarus, which the Greeks placed in our own solar system. Tartarus was considered being a part of the underworld, located below Uranus, Gaia, and the sea. Pontus, who was Gaia's son, as usual, born without coupling, as the Greek poet Hesiod said, was partly in charge of Gaia's Tartarus, located under the ocean. As the readers may recall, any male birthed by an Orion female comes from an unfertilized egg. Interestingly enough, Hesiod hints at this as well. The earthly Tartarus was basically a prison in which the Olympians put the Titans, whom they had captured alive after the Titan War. Pontus sounds eerily similar to Prince Lucifer, Gaia's the goddess son. In the Sirius system, Tartarus can be translated to the hounds of hell, and according to Robert Temple in his Sirius Mystery, the hounds of hell can also be seen as the term for the whole Sirius system. The dramatization of the Sirius incident was later told in Norse mythology, where the goddess Hel, or Hela, was the goddess of death, with her hounds guarding the domain. The hounds, in this sense, represent the dragon, according to the myth, and the great dragon is the mother goddess herself, the mother of creation. What it actually pertains to is the prison that was instigated by the mother goddess, the dragon, who is watching over the electronic prison in the Sirius system. Fig 9. The goddess Hel with one of her hounds, all symbolically speaking. It seems that when we compare the mythological Tartarus, where Lucifer plays Titans, with the Sirius counterpart, He copied what the Orions had done to some of his own legion in the Sirian Dark Star when he imprisoned the Titans. If so, it would hardly be surprising because in his continuous search for revenge, he had always done his best to turn the Orion system around. In order to give his old family a taste of their own medicine, as it were. Returning to the Sirian prisoners, how is it possible to release them if they are stuck inside an electronic fence or a grid? The only way would be to have them released in their spirit form and have them aim for us humans. They want our bodies, and Lucifer wants his legion for new assignments. Hence, we see a common agenda with a certain set outcome. They are coming for us. V. The Sirian-Arcturian Alliance. Where does the Sirian wolf-and reptilian race we were discussing in Level 2, which evolved in a similar frequency band as we humans, come into this picture? Well, they very much exist, and they did evolve, as described, on one of the planets in the Sirius system. They are very much part of this agenda. From what we know now, if we exclude Sol, Sirius has 3 active stars: Sirius A, B, and C. And there has been a lot of commotion in this triple star system since the gods first visited it, similar to creating a lot of commotion here on Earth. When Lucifer and his dark warriors enter a solar system and find that there is an evolving race already living there, either in the star itself or on one of our planets, they apply the same old routines. They either start a war against them and destroy them utterly, or they create slaves and/or soldiers out of them through manipulation, which includes giving them a lot of technology. Like they did here. On Earth, this started the Industrial Revolution, which led to our species coming out of the Dark Ages and beginning to evolve much faster. The wolf and reptilians, whom I from here on will call the Nibiruans, did not have the same interference in their evolution as we did, except in their later stage. The planet they evolved on was quite a harsh environment, and after they went from androgyny to dual sexes, the males soon took over the show. They were the stronger ones and, therefore, became the hunters and the dominant sex. Their planet once orbited the dark star Sirius, which at that point was of a similar size, magnitude, and spectral class as Sirius A, that is a white giant. The first encounter the Nibiruans had with extraterrestrials was when the Arcturians led by the king we now know as En.ki and his warrior race approached them. The Khan used the same manipulative technique as has been used here on Earth in order to get a foot in the door. He offered technology. The technology the Nibiruans were foremost interested in was of course weaponry, they, too, being a hunter and a warrior race. Moreover, the Arcturians offered them a ticket to travel to the stars. However, the Nibiruans were not star beings, they were planet-bound, so they couldn't travel unless they decided to give up their bodies. Which they were not ready to do. They were not spiritual beings, so their bodies were precious to them. Their wolf and reptilian form was beautiful in their eyes. What remained for them to do in order to be able to travel to other star systems was to transfer their fire into a more robust body that could function in the harsh space conditions. So the Arcturians taught them how to create the gray biomechanical body template. Once this was done, the soul transfer between the wolf and reptilian body and the gray body was completed with help from advanced technology, which sucked the soul out of the original body and attached it to the gray equivalent. At the same time, the Nibiruans had learned to build spaceships that could travel through stargates, that is Einstein-Rosen bridges. In exchange for being given all this technology, the Nibiruans signed a contract with the Arcturians. They became soldiers in the Arcturian army. For thousands of years, the Arcturians and the Nibiruans rubbed shoulders, conquering space. Both being ferocious warrior races, they loved what they were doing and, therefore, went along fairly well. One day they knocked on the door to the Orion Empire, and that was the first serious halt in their conquest. The rest of the story was pretty much told in Level 2. A war between the Syrian-Arcturian alliance and the Orions took place, which ended with the famous peace treaty, when En.ki married the Orion queen. The Syrian-Arcturian warriors became the special guardians of the Queen and Satania, the inner sanctuary of the Orion Empire. LPGC, and others, such as Charles Hall, a retired employee at the Nellis Air Force Base in Nevada, who had several encounters with an alien race called the Tall Whites, say that the Tall Whites may have been the creators of the Nibiruans. These Tall Whites were offered their own area in the Nevada desert, which they are still using as a base today in exchange for technology. This alien species claims to originate in the Arcturus star system. Fig 10. A tall white male with one of their children, whom they are very protective of. They are known to have killed humans who were approaching their kids or trying to touch them, in an instance. They are described as quite luminous beings. I don't think they are the creators of the wolf and reptilians, but may very well be the descendants of Kani-M.Lil's Arcturians, originating from the rebel group of Dick warriors who rebelled against the Khan and the Queen during Lucifer's rebellion. They are now most possibly working for En.ki and with the U.S. government. I would also suggest that these white, luminous bodies are shape-shifted into this form, and what we see are their avatars' light bodies. As we know, some Dick warriors were not happy with the peace treaty and thought that their King of Kings had been selling out. Therefore, they had no problem signing up with Lucifer, as discussed in the beginning of this paper. Many of these rebels are now stuck in the Dark Star prison, but a few who escaped, apparently, came to Earth eventually, creating one of their bases outside Nellis Air Force Base with the U.S. government's blessings. These beings have been seen together with U.S. military on the Air Force Base and in Las Vegas, where late at night they go into the casinos and play, something they apparently love. According to Charles Hall, they are always surrounded by human bodyguards when they are in town, and they are mostly dressed like humans, but wearing hoods and sunglasses, even around the midnight hours. In this disguise, they are apparently looking very human-like, but their bodyguards, although trying to be discreet, are embarrassingly obvious. During Lucifer's rebellion, many battles were fought, as we know, and quite a few took place in Sirius. Dr. Borden of the former LPGC told me that at one time, Sirius C went nova, and Nibiru was catapulted out of orbit and into deep space, and much later was sucked into our own solar system by Neptune's gravity. Since then, he said, we have had Nibiru as part of our solar system, visiting us approximately every 3,600 years, as Sitchin suggests. This, I believe, is only partly true, and I'll explain why. The following is what I believe happened. When battles between Lucifer and Orion were fought in Sirius, Sirius C was blown up by nuclear weapons, sitting in the crossfire between the two battling forces, and became a nova and later a white dwarf. Part of that white dwarf exists in En.ki and is, therefore, called the dark star. Nibiru was catapulted out in deep space, just like Dr. Borden explained to me more than 3 years ago, with the wolf and reptilians still on the planet. Many of them were saved by Lucifer. However, Lucifer managed to get them to flee underground before their atmosphere was destroyed. An artificial atmosphere underground was constructed. Later on, while still traveling with great velocity through deep space, Nibiru was visited by Lucifer and his cohorts. He promised to save them and their planet if the Nibiruans started working for him. They didn't see any other choice. Without help, their species would eventually die in space when they were depleted of their artificial atmosphere. Lucifer's scientists then started using gold in order to slowly be able to re-establish the original atmosphere, also drawing from the heat inside the planet, creating a sort of greenhouse effect, which eventually made the planet quite habitable, even without a sun. Furthermore, with time, Lucifer and his team hollowed out Nibiru and created a spaceship out of the former planet. Since then, the Nibiruans have been able to travel through space at will, navigating the celestial body through space and time, again using Einstein-Rosen bridges to travel long distances. Nibiru has ever since been used so that the wolf and reptilian race can visit Earth and our solar system when they have business this way. Although they keep their own wolf and reptilian body type while on Nibiru, they use the gray biomechanical spacesuit whenever they leave their planet. Working close with Prince Ea, we often see them here on Earth, sometimes accompanied by a human, which may not be a human, but one of Ea's minions in a human body or a member of the AIF, shape-shifting into human form. This, I believe, is a much more credible version of the Nibiru story, and it explains pretty well what we previously were uncertain about regarding this planet. Thus, I do not believe that it's on a 3,600-year orbit around the Sun, but instead can travel here whenever it's necessary, like any spaceship could. 6. Who was the consort who helped En.ki create Homo sapiens? In Sitchin's work, but also in many other people's research, En.ki, the self-proclaimed Lord of Earth, created mankind together with another highly trained scientist and geneticist, Ninhursag, who was also En.ki's half-sister, and later became his consort. However, in these papers, we have thoroughly proven that Ninhursag is just another title for Mother Goddess, and we know that En.ki did not work together with his mother to create mankind. Nor was she his lover. That would be an absurd thought after all we know now. There is overwhelming evidence that Mother Goddess created womankind, but not mankind, and womankind was created long before mankind. There is no doubt that this is the case, and the evidence has been shown in many places throughout these levels of learning, from level 2 and on. In fact, En.ki destroyed his mother's project, which involved the primordial androgynous womankind, the Namlú'u. So, why would Mother Goddess, under the title Ninhursag, want to create a watered-down version of her own creation, together with her rebellious son? That makes no sense, of course. With this in mind, we can also exclude that she was his lover. However, it still definitely seems as if En.ki was creating mankind together with a female scientist. But who was she, and where did she come from? In the mythological historical records, the names Ninhursag and Isis Ishtar and Anna have been confused with each other, another intentional alteration of records from the En.ki martyr camp. Indeed, as we shall see, if we interchange the name Ninhursag with Isis, we get a much truer story. Isis was, as I hinted at already in level 1, in the paper, Genesis, or the genes of Isis, the female geneticist who helped En.ki create the watered-down version of us humans. Isis is also generally associated with Sirius. In a later paper, I will tell the whole, quite emotional story about Isis and what really happened to her. Many of us are familiar with the Isis, Osiris, and Horus story, which some say is just an earlier version of the Jesus story. But like with so much else we are discussing concerning ancient history, there is always more to these stories. In the Isis story that I'm going to tell in the later paper, we will again see how one deity has been confused with several different deities, when they are actually one and the same. The result is, and the reason why I bring this up now, that this whole genetic experiment that has been credited to En.ki is, indeed, an Orion-Syrian conspiracy. And Homo sapiens to have both Orion and Syrian genes along with DNA from other species as well. I have been telling curious readers, who have been waiting for this level of learning to be released, that level 4 will bring the other 3 levels together. Indeed they will. 7. The ongoing rebellion. The universe we live in is huge, and we humans can only perceive approximately 4% of it, thinking that is a lot. Only in our own galaxy, there may be perhaps millions, perhaps billions, of star races and quite a few planetary-based races, although that's more uncommon. These papers will, directly and indirectly, be about Lucifer's rebellion, from beginning to the end, now told in more details as my research has progressed. I just want to put all this in perspective. Because the rebellion happened in Orion, which is the goddess' important domain, it has had a great impact on the rest of the galaxy, and in fact, many other parts of the universe. Hence, I found it crucial to tell this story with as many details as I can, because these En.ki are the beings who are, and always have been, influencing us the most throughout history. I see a lot of people trying to figure out who all the different star races and planetary races are, and they spend a lot of effort on it. What needs to be understood is that most of these different species we hear so much about here on Earth are part of the same plot. They are all the En.ki in the real sense of the term. It doesn't matter if they come from Alpha Draconis, Sirius, Orion, Lyra, Zeta Reticuli, the Pleiades, Arcturus, Antares, or most other star systems I can think of from the top of my head. They are all part of the story I am presenting in my papers. None of the ones I mentioned above is separate in the sense that they are unrelated to Lucifer's rebellion, which is the reason for the great cosmic wars. We need to understand this. Lucifer and his cohorts, who come from many different star systems, think they own this planet and have thought so ever since they sat their rebellious feet here. Some other star races, which have remained neutral in the wars, have also been here on Earth in the past and established some ancient civilizations, but they are rare. Normally, Lucifer doesn't let anybody into this solar system who is not part of his team, not since he took over the Stargate of Saturn and gained control over our solar system, which we shall talk more about in the next paper. Recently, however, there have been holes in the grid, and Lucifer's stronghold has weakened in other places, too, which has led to other, from the AIF's point of view, unwelcome visitors entering our star system against their will. The part of the universe where we live is of course very small, and it's located on the fringes of the Milky Way galaxy. Our section of the galaxy is often referred to as Sector 9, and the star beings people are discussing on the internet and in books are all located in Sector 9, including those in the constellation of Orion, which is a separate conception from that of the Orion Empire, which stretches out over several universes and includes star systems in many distant galaxies as well. Someone suggested that we must consider the galaxy as a whole and study the different civilizations that may dwell here, not only the AIF alien invader force. That sounds like a good idea, initially, but for the moment, I need to pass that bucket over to somebody else because for me it's secondary. First, we need to address the problems we have at home and find a solution for those, and then we can concentrate more firmly on races further out than Sector 9. If we so wish, civilizations totally unknown to us today. Keep in mind, however, that distance in space is not an obstacle when advanced beings cannot travel. Hence, because a civilization may exist 80,000 light years from here, it doesn't mean that it is not taking sides in Lucifer's rebellion. There are very few advanced star races in our universe that are not familiar with his rebellion. We humans, on the other hand, have been isolated here, recycled back into a closed system over and over, so for us, making contact with beings 80,000 light years away may seem pretty exciting and, perhaps, beneficial for our species in one way or another, but again, for me, it's not a big deal. All this will come in its natural sequence, as soon as we are free from manipulation and imprisonment. At that time, we are also free to explore the universe and the multiverse as we wish. However, before that is happening, I see no real gain in trying to find star races not included in the war. There is very little they can do for us and for them until we have awakened to the fact that we are being manipulated and trapped, and most important of all, until we are willing to do something about it as a mass consciousness. Before then, the civilizations out there, which we have in mind when we're talking about huge galactic distances, would see no benefit in creating a relationship with a species who doesn't even know who they are, where they come from, and more importantly, don't even know they are in prison. It's like if you and I would spend our time trying to make business deals with inmates at Folsom Prison or San Quentin. At least, those inmates know that they are in prison. Lucifer's rebellion is ongoing, it's devastating, and it's far from over. It won't be over until Lucifer is caught and put to justice, together with all the star beings and star races who have sided with him. Not until then is the war really over. Even if we humans would free ourselves totally from the negative influences our connection with the rebels have created, the war would not be over. It would only be another battle won, although it's an important one. Not only for us humans is it important, but also for the rest of the universe. It would free up a lot of stuck energy and create a huge relief among star beings and star races everywhere. Disclaimer. The purpose for this series of papers, as with anything and everything I have been writing, is to express my own conclusions, based on the research I have done. It must in no way be considered the ultimate truth and must not be considered anybody else's truth until that person has thoroughly thought these things through and decided that he or she may agree with what I have concluded, in part or as a whole. If somebody does not agree, it must be that person's right to individual thinking. Moreover, I do not want any religion, cult, secret society, or followers to be created out of my material. Also, I am not a guru or a leader of any kind, and I refuse to be treated or viewed as such. At the most, I am a student of the unknown and the mystics who wants to teach and share my experiences and the knowledge I think that I have gained. Thank you, Wes Penra.